Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee for December 6, 2022. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll to verify that we have a quorum for this committee.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Councilmember Wansley is absent. Councilmember Vita.
Present.
Councilmember Ellison.
Here.
Councilmember Osman.
Present.
Councilmember Goodman.
Present.
Councilmember Jenkins is absent. Councilmember Chavez.
Present.
Councilmember Chuktai.
Present.
Councilmember Koski.
Present.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Present.
Vice Chair Rainville.
Present.
And Chair Johnson.
Present.
We have 11 present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum for today's meeting. We have two items before us. The first is a consent item. It's a contract with Frederickson and Byron, Hilden Advocacy and Law and Primacy Group LLC for the legislative representative services. And I will go ahead and move that consent item, and then we'll have after that our discussion item, which is our 2023 legislative agenda and policy positions. So is there any discussion on that consent item? And I will just check the queue momentarily here. And I am not seeing any, so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And those abstain,
Abstain.
and the motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our discussion, which is the 2023 legislative agenda and policy positions. Staff did do an extensive presentation on this last time, so procedurally how we're going to work on this is I am going to go ahead and move the draft legislative agenda and policy positions that staff presented. A copy is before committee members right now for you to see, and then there are several motions from council members to amend the draft agenda, and we will take those up in order. Those are printed on a separate sheet in front of you. The first is a motion by Council President Jenkins. Since she is not here at the moment, I'm going to hold off on that one. We'll just do that one last on this agenda, and then we will move next to item number 2, which is a motion by Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Chavez, if you could introduce your motion, that would be great.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I have a variety of ones, so I'll just go through them one by one. But the first one, the motion is regarding gun violence prevention and responsible gun ownership. There's a bill at the state legislature, or there was previously, and I suspect that it will be reintroduced this coming year, that provides procedures under which law enforcement officers or city or county attorneys can petition for extreme risk protection orders, which would prohibit people from possessing firearms for a fixed period. So this is just one way to reduce gun violence across our state in Minnesota. And this amendment would basically add the prohibition of people from possessing firearms if they have been found to pose a significant danger to themselves or others by possessing a firearm. So I would move for approval.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Councilmember Chavez. That motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, and that has been seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? And I just heard a beep in the chat, but I'm looking this up here. Okay, that's our clerk. Thank you. I am not seeing any council members for discussion on this, so all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Those abstain. The motion carries. Next, we'll move on to item number 3 by Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. So cannabis has led to the criminalization and incarceration of many people, especially our Black and Latinx community members here in the state. So we need to ensure that any legislation on cannabis passed brings reinvestment back into these communities that were harmed by the enforcement. So that supports a pathway into this industry for individuals negatively impacted by the prohibition of cannabis and for a portion of resources derived from the sale of cannabis to be redirected into the communities that were negatively impacted. and I'll just make a motion for approval.
Thank you, Councilmember Chavez, for that motion. Is there a second? All right, that motion has been seconded. Any discussion from committee members? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. And any abstain, that motion carries. Council President Jenkins is with us and had motion number 1 on here for our amendments. So at this time, I will call on Council President Jenkins to make that motion and present that item.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. And I am just making a motion to support state investment in multi-modes of transit and transportation to ensure that our residents are able to move throughout the city.
Perfect. Council President Jenkins has made that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. Those abstain, the motion carries. We will now move on to item number 4 by Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. We have seen housing first models like the Vivo Tiny Villages work in Minneapolis, and in order to address homelessness, we know the dire need to tackle addiction, mental health, and housing stability. We need more funding streams to support initiatives like these to build more across our city here in Minneapolis. So on page 16, I'm just adding a part that says funding to support innovative housing and shelter models and housing first initiatives.
All right, we've got a motion by Councilmember Chavez. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Not seeing any, then all those in favor of this item, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. Moving on to items, item number 5 by Councilmember Chavez and Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. So we must use everything in our toolbox to expand transit access. The goal of this amendment is to help secure funding for FAIR programs and improve our current existing ones, like the Transit Assistant Program, which is designed to make public transit more affordable for people with lower incomes. It basically adds a section to explore FAIR programs and potential to expand and improve programs like the TAP program. And this is being co-authored by myself and Councilmember Payne, so if Councilmember Payne can speak to it as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, I'm really excited about this because, you know, we did a lot of extensive conversations with Met Council and other parties, and really this is about, there are current programs that help offset the cost of transit, but they're not very well utilized, and so there are equal opportunities in funding these programs to possibly get to a point of fare-free transit, but also exploring ways to make sure that the funds that are available are being utilized by the residents that they're meant for.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. So motion by Chavez and I'm guessing second by Payne.
Second, yeah.
And want to see if there's any additional discussion from my colleagues on this. Anyone? Not seeing any, then all those in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. We will now move on to item number 6 by Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm very happy that our legislative staff added language regarding the recovery of our cultural corridors. This amendment just makes a simple language. It adds supporting the full rebuilding and recovery, so it's just a small change.
Thank you, Councilmember Chavez. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. Next, we will move on to item number 7 by Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. The law enforcement lobby has been showing up in full force opposing the ban on law enforcement officers from being involved in hate, extremist, or white supremacist groups. The Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, who represent more than 10,000 public safety officials, said 92% of their members who responded to a survey have concerns about this proposed rule to ban white supremacy from our police force. As we enact police reform in Minneapolis, we must ensure that hate does not take place. Basically, what I'm adding is a part on systemic justice that requires the post board, so the Peace Officer Standards and Trainings Board, to modify the Peace Officer Code of Conduct to prohibit peace officers from affiliating with, supporting, or advocating for white supremacist groups, causes, or ideologies.
All right, motion by Councilmember Chavez. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on this item? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. Moving on to item number 8, Councilmember Chavez.
Chair Johnson, I'm actually dropping number 8. We're not going to be doing this. This actually became law just last year.
Thank you, Councilmember Chavez. So we'll skip that item and not take that up and move to item number 9.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. This amendment just adds more clarity to our current policy on the release of body cam footage. So basically asking for a define in the process for and how that data may be released.
Perfect. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion from colleagues on this? Not seeing any. I'll just ask. I see an end quote in this. I was wondering if that was intended or is that just that? Okay.
There was a mistake. Basically, if you look at your paper, and we're on number 8. Number 9, sorry. The period goes after released, so to the end of the existing policy on body cameras does not exist on this amendment.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe would you mind putting that in the chat for us just so we can see the final version? And then I'll call on Councilmember Goodman in the meantime, who
Thank
is in
you,
the
Mr.
chat.
Chair, and thank you to Councilmember Chavez. I just want to clarify, these are not things the city is doing. I do think that there's this kind of, I know Councilmember Chavez knows that, but I'm trying to clarify because the language seems to be, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We're not doing any of these things. We're asking the legislature to do these things. And a great example of that is item number 2. There is no one on this dais that would disagree that people who should not have firearms if they pose a significant danger to themselves or others, but we don't have the power to make that change, and I don't want to leave anyone who's watching this out there to think, oh, without discussion, we're passing all of these changes. We're asking the legislature to take up these positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman, and I appreciate you raising that for folks that are watching. That's a great clarification to add in this, that this is really about the city's lobbying positions over at the legislature. Council Vice President Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To that end, I really appreciate this particular motion on data practices because, as we have all experienced, there are times that the city is unable to release body camera footage because of the state data practices laws. So even when we have the Minneapolis legislative delegation demanding that we release it, it really is because of the state data practice laws that we are prohibited from as fast as the public would like to see it. So this really helps to clarify that and helps us to be clear as to how and when that information would be released. So I do hope, I think this is a very important and nuanced thing that you've brought up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President. And I see Councilmember Chavez has made that note in the chat, which is just really removing the underline on part of number 9 as we have them. And so I will suggest to our clerks that that is the intent of Councilmember Chavez's motion. It was seconded. So I want to see if there are any additional comments or questions from council members. Not seeing any, then all those in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Those abstain. That motion carries. Next, we move on to item number 10. Councilmember Chavez.
Chair Johnson, I think you're all going to be happy that this is my last one. So some immigrant community members are in immigration removal proceedings because they relied on incorrect advice or absent advice from counsel on immigration. There is a bill at the legislature that would support a law change on post-conviction relief. So if a person was in immigration removal proceedings because of advice that they took, they would be able to change that. So we added a bullet point that says explore options for post-conviction relief for a person in immigration removal proceedings. It's a change that I would like to move forward.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And there's a second on that. Any discussion from council members? Not seeing any, then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. We have completed these amendments to our legislative agenda and policy positions. I will do one final call to see if there are any additional ones from council members. I know we had a chance to connect with staff and talk about that. I see Council Member Payne in the queue.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I have an amendment that I would like to move. It is also related to data practices, like Vice President Palmisano mentioned. There are certain, there are things that are not clear in that language at state law, and one of the things from my intention is to bring some clarity to how we can publicly disclose discipline records. And one of the barriers to that is what is codified as discipline and not. And so we can only right now share discipline records once a discipline has been assigned. But if there's been an investigation that has sustained a complaint, that is not public data in our current law. So my motion is to support amending Minnesota Data Practices Act, Section 13.43, subsection 2, to extend the definition of status of complaint against a peace officer to include whether or not the complaint was sustained. So I think what is relevant to the public about police conduct is whether or not a complaint was investigated and there was merit to that investigation, and that there was a due process that found that whatever that conduct was, it was investigated and sustained. I think that should be of public record, not just how we follow up with that determination of a sustained complaint with discipline. So it's just adding that layer of clarity.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, and there's a second. Any discussion from council members on this? I guess I would just, since this wasn't included in our packet, I guess I would just ask our IGR staff if they've had a chance to review and what their recommendation is.
Council members, we have had a chance to review this item, and we did provide some technical assistance on language just to have it fit within the structure of the legislative agenda. We have not had an opportunity to vet this with all the city departments that may be interested in it. So we don't, IGR staff don't have a recommendation one way or another at this time on this one specifically, just because we didn't have the time to do that vetting. But we did provide some technical assistance on the language.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Director. Any additional discussion from council members or questions? Not seeing any. Nope. Council President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. And this question is for the author, Councilmember Payne. If so, a complaint is filed, but then whether or not it has been sustained there's a lag in time. So would we not report the complaint until a determination is made? How are you seeing this working?
So current statute allows to publicly share the existence and status of any complaint, but that has a very narrow definition as established by case law and meeting with the city attorney. That status is limited to essentially open, pending, and closed. So there isn't a lot of information, so you don't know the difference between an allegation and a sustained complaint. And so I would like us to have some refinement so that once there is a determination that that allegation had merit, and that merit is sustained through a due process investigation process. I would like for state law to not restrict the city and how we want to report that kind of data. As of right now, we can only report that a complaint exists or it doesn't exist, essentially. Or we can report that somebody was disciplined. But if there was a stage in that investigation process where conduct was identified and investigated and found to be of merit, we can't say that publicly right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions from colleagues? Not seeing any. All those in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. I will see if there are any additional motions or amendments to our legislative agenda and policy positions from colleagues. Going once, going twice, 3 times. All right. Well, we have this amended legislative agenda and policy positions document before us. I will go ahead and see if there are any comments or discussion on that. If not, I will just extend my gratitude once again to our IGR team who leads this effort and all the city staff who have brought forward their ideas, and my colleagues as well for all of their ideas on how we continue to update and refine this document that can be the city's guiding document for our work over at the legislature in fighting for the residents of Minneapolis and the best interests of our city. And so just really appreciate all of the work that went into this. It's truly dozens, if not hundreds of hours of effort that continue to be put into this living document. I will call on Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I do want to thank our amazing staff for all the work that they did on this. And also, I'm not sure if y'all followed the news today, but there's a $17 billion surplus. So I just want to make sure people know about the surplus that is actually going to help a lot of people here if we do things right.
Thank you, Councilmember Chavez. Any other comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor of this amended legislative agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. And before we adjourn, I'm going to call on Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if you could give us a brief update, Katie, on how you approached the Minneapolis delegation with this information. What is the process so the public understands how we work in cooperation with our senators and representatives?
Sure, Chair Johnson, Councilmember Rainville. We will be sharing the written document with them once it's updated, sending that directly to them. But we also have a delegation meeting that we're working to get scheduled in the next week or two here so that we can formally meet with them, share with them what's on the agenda, and then also hear from them what their priorities are. As you're aware, we have a number of Minneapolis delegation members in chair seats and in leadership positions coming into the legislative session, so we want to be sure we're collaborating on what their priorities are, where they match with the cities, so that we can move forward together. So we will be meeting with them in the coming weeks, and then, of course, as session gets going, meeting with them on a regular basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Director. And seeing no further business before this committee, I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.